Wanna see a card trick? Pick a card. Eight of spade. King of heart. Ace of spade. King of club. Good day, first-hand coders. The objective for today's lab is to understand what variables are and what data types are in Python and write a simple Python program. So a variable is the name we give to a memory location where we save some kind of value. So for example, in Python, if we have x is equals to 10, the computer would look for a free memory in its head, and it will give it a name x, and it will store the value 10 in that location. Since the computer runs its code from top to bottom, if we have another line here and we put 10 x equal to 11, what the computer will do is it will clean up whatever is in this memory location and it will replace it with 11. So what variables do for us is they allow us to refer back to that memory location for our further analysis. But there is one problem. The letter A in the computer is represented by 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1. Also, the number 65 is represented by 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1. So as you can see, if we store x equal to a, if we store a in x, and if we store 65 in x, we are expected to get the same value in the memory location. So it's very important for the computer to know whether we are saving the value a or we are saving the value 65. This is why we have data types in computer programming. As the name implies, data types tell the computer what category of data you are saving in that particular memory location. So in Python, we have strings, we have integers, and we have float. So a string is any value that has no mathematical powers. We don't use it for additions or subtractions. We use it to represent categorical information, or we want to send message. So for example, hello is a string, but in programming you have to put it in quotation marks so that the computer knows you mean hello and you don't mean the variable hello. So this is a variable while this is a string, a constant, also called literal. However, integers and floats a representation of values that will allow us to do mathematics. So for example, if I have x is equals to 1 and I have y is equals to 2, then if I do z is equals to x plus y, when the computer comes, it will put 1 inside x. Then when it goes to the next line, it will see that there is need for another memory location. It will make space and it will give the variable the name y, and then it stores 2 there. So in the third line, it will see that we need a third memory location, z, and we would store the summation of x and z. Okay, enough stories. Let's try writing some code. For those of us who have Linux or Mac, you can just start your terminal and type Jupyter Notebook, and your Jupyter Notebook should start. Okay, so my Jupyter Notebook is starting in the root folder. So if you open my home directory, you would see that it is starting from the root folder. If you compare the file names, so this is the root folder. So let me go to Documents and let me create a folder for the class. So new folder. Okay, the new folder has been created. You can just sort by date, few seconds. So this is it. Just rename it. Okay, so this is the name of my folder, and then we can go ahead and start a notebook. Okay. To give the file a nice name, a meaningful name, let's come here and let's say variables lab. And we save it. So if you go back to the main file for the Jupyter Notebook, you can see that in Documents, in First-Hand Coder Books, I have this lab, variables lab. Okay, so how do we create a variable? Well, if you just say x is equal to 1, you have created a variable in Python. So to execute this code, just click Run. Okay, now if we want to see what is inside x, we simply say print x. So if you run this, you can see the value of x. Let's create another variable. Y is equals to 12.5. To print this, we just type print y. If you run this, we can add comments to explain what we are doing. So we say creating an integer variable. Okay, so here we can add a comment. Comments are not executed by the computer. They are just there to help you remember what you have done. So let's add another variable here, z, and let's put string inside. Okay, so now if I have now let's run this. We are only seeing y. Now if we do this, and we run the code, so the computer reads from top to bottom as we have said earlier, and it prints y. It creates a space and store y as float. It creates another space and stores z as a string, and then in line 3 it prints y, in line 4 it prints z. You can print them at the same time by saying x, x, y, z, separated by comma like you are listing items. So x, y, and z are printed. We also know that we cannot use strings for calculation. So let's try and see. So if I say something like x plus y, if I run this, what do I get? I get 1 plus 12.5, I get 13.5. What if I say x plus z? If I run this, what do I get? I get an error. And the error in Python would contain an error message. The most important part is the description for the error. You can see it is telling us that what I'm trying to do is not supported because I cannot use the operator plus together with a string, with an integer and a string. So what it's trying to tell me is I cannot add an integer with a string because a string has no mathematical capabilities. Okay, so now let's write it in a better way. Let's say let's see the types in each of these values. If we say type x, if you run this, you see it's an integer. What is the type of y? If you run this, you would see that it is float. What is the type of z? If you run this, you would see that it's a string. So one more thing, let's write a complete code. So let's say we have a variable p. It contains the addition of x and y. Then finally we print p. So if we run this, what do we get? We get the sum. But this output doesn't explain what our code does. Only those chosen few who can read code would understand what we are doing here. So let's add a message inside the print so that we understand what's happening. So we can say x plus y is equal to, and then we separate by a comma so that when the computer is going to print this line, it will start with x plus y. It will print this as is because this is a string. It has quotation mark, so it will be printed as is. But p when the computer sees this variable and there is no quotation mark around it, the computer knows that this is a memory location, so it goes into the memory, look for that value, and then it prints it. Let's improve it one more time. Let's say we want the user to give us the input. We can use the keyword input. Input will collect values from the keyboard and it will save it in a variable. So we will say x equal to input. So the value will go inside will come from input and it will enter into x. Now let's try this code. Oops, we get an error because the input is a string. So what do? We convert this string into float. So we can say float x, we are saving integers in x. So let's say int x. Okay, now what's going to happen is that the computer, when it comes to line 1, it will start with whatever is inside the bracket first. So it will collect input from the user. It will give that input to int, which will convert it to integer, and then the integer representation of that value will be saved in x. So let's run this. We are now in line 1, so we put a value, and then line 2 will do the addition, and then line 3 will print the results. So let's add another one, y equal to float input, and then, but this time around, let's add a message so that the user would know what to put. So since we are sending a message, we put it in quotations. Now if we run this, what do we get? So for the first line, we don't have any message inside, so it will just appear like this. For the second line, you can see I'm getting a for your information message that you want me to enter a real number. So I know you need some fraction inside. Since it is float, float holds values for real numbers. If you run this, you can see 12 plus 12.465, it will give us 24.465. So with this, we finish with today's class. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.